We shall not pretend to have any understanding of the bond between dragon and Dragonrider. Wiser heads have pondered that mystery for centuries. We do know, however, that dragons are not horses, to be ridden by any man who throws a saddle on their back. The writings of Gyldayn, Fire and Blood, the dying of the dragons. Now, I'm not a fan of the House Targaryen subreddit, and generally a lot of the social media discourse around the show, for many reasons. But I do occasionally take a look, as I often find people, mostly who have not read the book, asking questions about the lore that do actually give me pause for thought. Questions I never really considered before, that seem simple, but then when you dig into it, have much more in-depth and complex answers in lore than you might first expect. Today, I want to break down and analyse one of these questions, because I think it's a perfect example of the HBO shows overlooking key parts of the lore and hoping people don't notice. So in this video, we are going to be taking a deep look at Aemma Arryn, the first wife of King Viserys I and mother of Rhaenyra, asking, why does Aemma Arryn not have a dragon when all of her Targaryen cousins do? Before getting into detail of why Aemma does not have a dragon, and was never even given the opportunity to claim one, it's important to understand her position in the extended Targaryen family tree. She and her husband Viserys are first cousins, along with the likes of Daemon and Princess Rhaenys, and if you want to include them as well, the bastard sons of Sarah Targaryen. They are all grandchildren of King Jaehaerys Targaryen and Good Queen Alysanne. Viserys and Daemon via Balon Targaryen and Alyssa Targaryen, Rhaenys via Aemon Targaryen and Jocelyn Baratheon, and Aemma via her mother Daela Targaryen and her father Roderick Arryn. Now this all seems perfectly fine, but there is one key thing to this that changes the relationship between Aemma and the rest of her cousins. Viserys, Daemon and Rhaenys all come from Targaryen fathers, and in Viserys and Daemon's case, mother as well. It is probable that given the proximity, they would have spent a lot of time at court and on Dragonstone, in each other's company. Aemma's father, Roderick Arryn, is well an Arryn, and with Aemma's mother, Daela, dying during childbirth, giving birth to her, Aemma doesn't have such a firm relationship and link back to court, her cousins, and likely her grandparents, and thus this changes Aemma's position greatly. For what we can tell, it's only after her betrothal to Viserys in 93 AC, she really becomes an active part of the closer royal family, well given she had just married the heir's presumed heir. A man had to only look at them to know they were not like other men. Their eyes, their hair, their very bearing, all proclaimed the differences, and they flew dragons. Gyldayn, writing about the doctrine of exemptionalism, Fire and Blood, a time of testing. So all of Aemma Arryn's Targaryen cousins are Dragonriders, or were Dragonriders. Viserys claimed Balerion the Black Dread in 93 AC. Daemon claimed Caraxes sometime between 92 and 103 AC, and Rhaenys claimed Meleys in 87 AC. But, as we have made clear already, the key difference between Aemma and her cousins is she is not a core part of the royal family, given she is technically an Arryn. Up until this point, the only Dragonriders in Westeros bore the name Targaryen. I made a video a long time ago about this, but the best way to look at dragons is to think of them as nuclear weapons. If you are the only faction with them, you find yourself in a very powerful position. In the case of a medieval-style dynasty such as House Targaryen, that power makes you difficult to overthrow or disobey, but the threat the dragons possess only works if a single house controls them. Thus why I made my video about House Velaryon having access to dragons was always going to cause an issue sooner or later. Laena and Laenor being allowed to claim and hatch dragons via their mother, Rhaenys, ultimately diminished the threat House Targaryen held over the rest of the realm. What you have to consider here is until Jaehaerys and Alysanne's many children, the direct royal family was quite compact due to the fact incestuous marriages were so common during the first half of Targaryen rule. By marrying brother and sister together, it keeps the Dragonriders in the main family. keeps the dragons in the family, and thus keeps the power within House Targaryen. I think this aspect of the incestuous marriages was part of why Jaehaerys was so keen to codify and justify it with the Faith of the Seven, with the doctrine of exemptionalism. And that's where Rhaenys becomes an issue, and one Jaehaerys probably wanted to avoid if he could. We can go back to the ends of the earth together, but I'll get there first, as I'll be flying. Rhaenys Targaryen to her husband-to-be Corlys Velaryon. Fire and blood, the long reign, Jaehaerys and Alysanne, policy, progeny, and pain. Rhaenys was the first Targaryen woman who was firstly unmarried and secondly was not going to marry incestuously for a multitude of reasons. In 90 AC, when her marriage to Corlys Velaryon was arranged, she had no brothers. Her uncle Aegon Targaryen, while 27 years old, was already a maester by this point. Daemon was 9 years old, and Viserys was 13 years old. While a 3-year age gap is not huge, I think it was likely not an option. Yes, he didn't marry Aemma until 93 AC, but it is likely that this match had already been arranged well before that, so there wasn't really any male Targaryens Rhaenys could marry. This is why she would need to marry outside of the house. This in itself is not uncommon for women of House Targaryen, in general, or even men for that matter, but at least with the men, you don't have the Dragonrider issue to worry about. But here's the aspect I think people are really overlooking, a key detail, but an important one. If we take away the dragon issue, there is nothing to object to with Rhaenys' marriage to Corlys Velaryon. So if keeping dragons in the family is so important, and Jaehaerys himself was so aware of that, why did he allow Rhaenys to claim a dragon, knowing this would one day be an issue? The truth is, we don't know the circumstances of how or why Rhaenys claimed Meleys in 87 AC, but given Jaehaerys was happy to fly with Rhaenys on a tour of the Reach, he didn't seem to object to the fact she had a dragon. I just don't think Jaehaerys foresaw her own children not only possibly hatching sea smoke, but claiming Vhagar as well. But at the end of the day, Rhaenys is still first and foremost a Targaryen princess. There also seems to be this misconception that Dragonriders were common in House Targaryen, but it only seems like that due to how narrow the family tree was until we get to Jaehaerys and Alysanne and their 13 children. Before then, it seemed like everyone was a Dragonrider, because frankly there wasn't that many Targaryens, with this only compounded thanks to all the sibling marriages. Once the family got big under Jaehaerys and Alysanne, only a fraction of their children were Dragonriders. Out of the 13 children, only 3 of them ever claimed a dragon: Aemon, Balon, and Alyssa. What's even more interesting is these 3 children were from the older generation of Jaehaerys' progeny, the eldest living 3, with them all very close in age. It was also very clear early on that Balon and Alyssa were always going to marry, since they were children. It always seemed to me it was an active choice on Jaehaerys' part not to allow his younger children dragons, because at this time the main line of the royal family and the ruling of the 7 kingdoms would have been done by this older generation of Aemon, Balon, and Alyssa. Also factor in that most of the younger children of Jaehaerys who lived through childhood were in fact girls. It makes sense why there may have been reluctance for them to become Dragonriders. You have a lack of male Targaryens they can marry, therefore they would need to marry outside the house, and you thus risk losing access to your super weapons to another family, which as we have discussed is a huge problem. There were plenty of unclaimed dragons at this time, so having the younger children not claim them was an active choice. When you put all of this together, what becomes clear is Princess Rhaenys really was the exception to the rule, and you can start to understand why Aemma was never given the opportunity to be a Dragonrider. We don't really have that much information in regards to the concept of Jaehaerys' younger children and the idea of them being Dragonriders. The one insight we get perhaps comes from the scandal of his 9th born child, his daughter Serra. Such a fierce little thing she is. They say she has no need of comfort. They are wrong in that. All men need comfort. Septon Bath on Serra Targaryen's character. Fire and blood, the long reign, Jaehaerys and Alysanne, policy, progeny, and pain. In 84 AC, when Serra was 17 years of age, she and her friends were involved in a huge scandal involving several men. Of course, the men and the friends in question were severely punished for this, with one, Baxton Beesbury, the man accused of sleeping with Serra, being killed by Jaehaerys in a trial by combat. Anyway, Serra was punished for her role in all of this, effectively being the ringleader. However, while her parents were deciding how to handle the matter, one night, Sarah snuck out of her rooms, stole a horse, and ran halfway across the city, up the Hill of Rhaenys to the Dragon Pit, where she was promptly stopped by the Dragon Keepers. It's very obvious that Sarah was going to try and claim and maybe steal a dragon, perhaps to run away from home and avoid her punishment. It's very reminiscent of the tale of Aemma Targaryen and her brutal and horrifying fate, except Sarah was stopped before any damage could be done. This act of defiance was very in character for Sarah, but kind of the last straw for Jaehaerys, with his troublesome daughter sent to stay with her sister, Septa Maegella, in Old Town, with the looming threat of her joining the faith herself. That is past the context of this video. The point is, Sarah wanted a dragon, and it's clear Jaehaerys didn't want her to have one, as she likely already possessed one by this time, and well, she tried to steal one after all. It seems Sarah not having a dragon or being a Dragonrider was an active choice made by Jaehaerys and perhaps Alysanne. Again, like we have discussed, the politics of marriage could be a factor here. So as before, if we look again at the context of Jaehaerys' younger children, we see that Rhaenys again was the exception to the rule. This also goes a long way to explain why Aemma Arryn wasn't given a dragon egg in her cradle as a babe, but the issue with the whole idea of cradle eggs is it's kind of become the narrative in the fandom that this practice was normal, hence why people assume that every child with a drop of Targaryen blood got a dragon egg. The truth is, while it did of course happen, it's not a given and was certainly not common during this era. The practice of placing a dragon egg in a babe's cradle seems to date back to Rhaenys Targaryen, the eldest child of King Rhaenys Targaryen, and the elder sister of Jaehaerys and Alysanne. And well, Aegon the Uncrowned too, but he's not really important for this video. When her younger siblings were born, Rhaena placed dragon eggs in their cradles, which would go on to hatch into Vermithor and Silverwing. It seems Jaehaerys and Alysanne carried on this tradition to some degree, as we know an egg was at least placed in Aemon Targaryen's cradle, which likely hatched into Caraxes. Given Balon and Alyssa claimed grown dragons, we don't know if they too had eggs that didn't hatch. There is no information to suggest that Jaehaerys' younger children got eggs, or even grandchildren for that matter. As for Viserys, Daemon and Rhaenys all claimed grown dragons. In terms of Laenor Velaryon having a cradle egg, which is commonly accepted among fans, we don't actually know if he hatched Sea Smoke, as in text it does just say he bonded with the hatchling Sea Smoke by 101 AC. It's still possible he could have hatched the dragon, but the language here is a bit ambiguous. His sister Laena of course claimed Vhagar, and we have no information if she too had a cradle egg. We also have the fact that when Jaehaerys and Alysanne's second-born daughter, Princess Daenerys, died as a child, Jaehaerys desperately sent for an egg from the hatcheries at Dragonstone, shipping it to the Red Keep, thinking the egg might somehow help her recover from her illness, only for the egg to arrive late, with the princess dying shortly after. So the idea of cradle eggs was not necessarily common or a rule during the reign of Jaehaerys. It's not until the reign of Viserys I that every newborn seems to have a cradle egg, with this practice carrying on well after the Dance of the Dragons, as House Targaryen tried to recover their lost power. So given all of this, you can start to understand why Aemma Arryn would not have had a cradle egg, despite her mother being, well, a Targaryen. The simple answer to the question as to why Aemma Arryn was not a Dragonrider is quite simple. It's in her name, Arryn. She is not a direct member of House Targaryen, and ideally, the likes of King Jaehaerys are going to want to keep the core of their power within the house, otherwise it diminishes and opens them up and makes a Dance of the Dragons-like event much more likely. When you are the only house with this super weapon, your power and authority can't really be questioned and tested. Targaryen women who were not marrying incestuously within House Targaryen did not become dragon riders for this very reason, and the women who did become riders, or tried to at least, either claim their dragon after marrying another Targaryen, such is the case with Alyssa Targaryen, or try and steal a dragon, like in the stories of Sarah Targaryen. The fact that Rhaenys Targaryen was allowed to become a Dragonrider is an exception to the rule. It was known she was likely going to marry outside the house, yet she was able to claim a dragon regardless when so many others were not given that same opportunity. Why? Well, I'm not sure, and to me it's one of the bigger mysteries and questions I have about Fire and Blood. George R. R. Martin crafted the politics of his world with intent, so I doubt it's a factor he's overlooked. but Rhaenys Targaryen is the exception that proves the point of the issue of there firstly being too many dragons, and secondly, two different factions having access to the dragons, especially when one of those factions is not House Targaryen and has a direct rival claim to the throne to yours. Aemma Arryn would of course marry Viserys Targaryen, and thus marry back into the Targaryen direct family line. So in a way, the idea of Aemma being a Dragonrider would maybe presented much less risk than Rhaenys having a dragon, who married outside the family. But the reason I love this question so much is it sounds like a simple one, but the more you peel away, the more complex the politics become, and the world lore behind it. It really highlights the political headache of House Targaryen and the power of dragons.